So welcome everybody to EU's Green Week. That, as you've probably noticed, this time is quite lively and live streamed. And welcome to GlobeEU's web live stream about sustainable food and challenges about food policies. Well, everybody is of course talking about food. Food is delicious, it's vital, it's important. And when it comes to food politics, everything almost goes wrong. And that is the easiest part for consumers, producers and almost to our industries to get it right. And this is the biggest one thing what one consumer can do to prevent climate change and to work for the betterment of environment. And yes, we do have the resources. Just to remind that we produce double the amount of the calories what we need to consume. So we are basically wasting the half of it in our procedures. But let's move to our specialist. And I would like to wholeheartedly welcome, of course, our commissioner, Vytenis Andriukaitis, who very kindly promised to join us and to give his comments about the food politics. Then we'll continue with Luc Baas, the director of IUC and very active debater in the food politics also. Then welcome via Skype Hans Herren, CEO of Millennium Institute, one of the leaders on science and debate about what is sustainable food. Then we need the industries to get things right. And welcome, of course, Christian Prinz, Director of the European External Affairs of Unilever. And we are still waiting Margaret Auken, who was stuck in the airport because the flight was delayed, but she'll sneak in and join us as soon as she can. And you, of course, you can comment and you can post questions via Twitter, and the hashtag is GlobeEUFood. So please join us and question, comment, debate. But now, Commissioner Andriukaitis, I know that you are passionate about food and health issues, so we would be happy to hear your comments on the subject about sustainable food production.
Thank you. I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to participate in this interesting event and how to ensure our food is sustainable. It's really a very serious question. I will focus on aspects of the debate which accord with my responsibility as European Commissioner for Health and Food Safety. 10 billion people expected to be living on this planet in 2050. 10 billion. How to ensure that they all have access to sufficient supply of safe, nutritious food in the backdrop of climate change, shrinking natural resources, and conflicts around the world. In addition, people's expectations when it comes to food go much further than just safety. Methods of production come increasingly under the spotlight, and people are looking for guarantees that the way our food is produced reflects our values and ethics. Indeed, sustainable production and consumption of food is an important asset for the European Union. This is reflected in several European Union policies that safeguard the health and welfare of citizens and also of that of farm animals. Taking into account these aspects, I would like to develop on how to make sure we don't waste our resources and make use of science-based practices to ensure sustainable food productions. Let me start with food waste. In our quest for food sustainability, the fight against food waste is of central importance. Today, 1 in 9 people do not have enough to eat. Hunger and malnutrition are in fact the number one health risk worldwide, greater than AIDS, than malaria and tuberculosis combined. In Europe in 2014, 122 million people were at risk of poverty or social exclusion. It's now, today. 55 million were not able to afford a quality meal every second day. At the same time, according to the latest estimates of the European Union-funded fusion projects, nearly 90 million tons of food are wasted annually in the EU. We need to stop this, of course. And the United Nations Sustainable Development Summit held last year. World leaders adopted the 2020 Agenda for Sustainable Development, which includes targets to eradicate hunger and to halve food waste by 2030. We have only 14 years. Food waste prevention is also an integral part of the Commission's new circular economy package. We call on member states to reduce food waste generation in line with sustainable development goals. This objective can be achieved by strengthening resource efficiency, boosting global competitiveness, fostering sustainable growth, and generating new jobs in the agri-sector as in all sectors of the economy. And of course, for Commission, it's very important circular economy. And a related waste legislation proposal was called on member states to reduce food waste generation in line with sustainable development goals. The Commission will propose harmonized methodology to measure food waste and will establish this year a multi-stakeholder platform to help all actors define measures needed to prevent food waste, share best practices and evaluate progress. I think that it is very important to understand complexity of food waste problems, and of course when we speak about sustainability, we must understand also we all know, we all are, I think we all agree that we all are friends of environmentally friendly policies. No one is against. Contrary to what I sometimes hear, these policies don't belong to certain political groups or non-governmental organizations. Climate change, deforestation, floods, long periods of drought show that science and innovation are key to ensure sustainable agriculture system and access to safe food. Certainly food in the European Union is known for its diversity and long-held traditions. It is a heritage that should be celebrated and maintained. However, I believe we have to make full use of technologies and innovations in food production that can help us reduce the environmental impact and also enhance food security and bring real benefits to consumers. May I stop here to see your opinions and to continue our discussions. It will be much more interesting.
Thank you. And you mentioned all the important parts and elements of the food. It, of course, would need to be safe for human beings. It would need to be healthy. It would need to be affordable so that everybody can eat safe and healthy food. It should be environmentally friendly. It should take into account fairness toward the producers, consumers, and all of the production chain. And of course, its environmental footprint should be within the limits. And as we know, the food is 30% of the resource use and 30% roughly about the climate change. So this has a big impact. But I'm sure, Luke Passi, you would like to continue on here, and then we'll have a chance to comment each other after we had the first interventions. Luke, please.
Thank you very much, Sirpa. Let me start by saying that I'm very happy to hear about the stakeholder platform that will be kicked off because it's really in the DNA of IUCN. As you know, we have government members and a lot of very diverse non-governmental members, from the users to the environmental NGOs, and so we will be closely watching and contributing where we can on the debate. On the title of our panel, I think it's inevitable that we have to connect the consumption and production in one line, and actually we should always mention it together. So maybe we just didn't think of it here in the title, but we actually should say food production and consumption, because one steers the other, and vice versa. So I think that's a crucial thing to look at. From an IUCN perspective, obviously we look at the social aspects and the economic aspects as much as we do as on the environmental aspects. But if we look at the basis of where we actually get our resources from, it's always from, and especially in the food sector, from healthy ecosystems. I mean, sometimes they're not as diverse as we might want, but even a field of a farmer is an ecosystem. So it has to be healthy, the soil has to be healthy, and we have to have a healthy production. So nature, ecosystems, food, that chain and vice versa is definitely very much connected, and we often forget how much nature actually delivers. I mean, Natura 2000 has made this estimate of 200 to 300 billion euros a year that actually these nature areas provide to us. When we look at the production part, of course, production will be pushed by some of the producers, and therefore consumption may be steered. And on the other way around, of course, when there is unhealthy consumption, then the producers will follow. So the question is, how do we break that vicious circle? But if you look at some of the very clear facts, especially on the waste, it was already mentioned before. It's almost unbelievable how much food is wasted through the whole chain, from the very start in the production through the suppliers and the processors to where we are in the retail and as a consumer. So that's a huge issue. We cannot not look away from that. And the circular economy package is putting attention to it, but it is a bit too much in the voluntary sphere now, I think. It's good to have some voluntary incentives, but I think we have to take it a step further where you really have some clear targets on food waste, because it is a win-win for everyone. There is nothing that's hard to bring in any arguments to not have some strict and ambitious targets on reducing food waste. I would be very interested to hear if anyone would disagree with very, very, very clear and tough targets. Another issue linked to production and consumption, of course, but is also the surface and the amount of surface that has been used for meat production. That, I think, is a very important point to make, and we still see, honestly, big agro-industry still promoting more meat consumption. This is unbelievable. We are not advocating for vegetarians or veganists or for us all to become, but if we already reduce a little bit, this has an enormous impact on CO2 emissions, on land use. It's enormous. Even 1 day of no meat per week is already having a lot of effect. And of course, the less meat, the better. Of course, then you have to explain this to the ones that produce the meat, and they will argue, yeah, okay, then we will sell less and we will lose jobs. And you have that debate. But I think we have to go from quantity to quality. And when there is quality, the prices should be allowed to be higher. I mean, it should be okay to pay a bit more for the meat. It will reduce consumption, and farmers, the cattle farmers, will still get enough revenue. So, and this is a general thing with food production. So we have to make sure that there is enough social correction in Europe for people to be able to afford the food, quality food. And there will have to be some incentive with higher prices for the unsustainable food that we all consume. Well, I think I could go on a bit longer. I just want to make one point to finalize, is that we have a big opportunity year, 2016, in many ways, and the food production is connected with the reduction of CO2 emissions. So we have the Paris incentive and the Paris Agreement. And we have, of course, as already mentioned by the Commissioner, the SDGs, and specifically SDG 12, which focuses on sustainable consumption and production. And there, a big part and a big target is this reduction, or to at least half the waste that we produce. So let's use this year as an opportunity to make some bold steps in Europe, but also looking at Europe's effect outside, because I think much of our consumption patterns or consumption of food has incredible devastating effects outside of Europe. But I will leave it here for now.
Thank you. So food and agricultural ecosystems needs to be sustainable, and it is easy to measure there when they are. And we can hear the advice already. Locally produced seasonal vegetables, local fish, and then you can pay a bit more for the food and meat when you buy it, and that relates to animal welfare, of course, and the income of the producers. But about the issues and solutions, Hans-Herren, I'm very, very glad that you could join us from the other side of the Atlantic, and we've been appreciating your efforts on sustainable food. You are one of the genuine champions on this field, so we would like to hear what are your advice and your comments on the debate, and then we'll move on to Margaret Auken, who just sneaked in after her late flight was delayed, so happy that you could join us. Hans, please.
Yeah, hello Sirpa, thank you for the invitation. Also, hello fellow panel member. It's very nice to be with you this afternoon or morning here in California. Very good things have been said already by my colleague panelists. I wanted to add maybe a little bit from, again, from an agronomist point of view, and also as the co-chair of the former International Assessment of Ag Science Technology for Development. And I think that the issue really is, and I think Sirpa, you mentioned this, we do produce enough food. I want to reiterate, that today we grow about double what is required, and we know that a lot gets wasted. We heard that, we need to change this. I think what we need to mention all the time is, where is there too much production? Where is there not enough? And when we look forward, I think we have to change the way we grow food around the globe. We have to go to agroecological practices. This is the number one thing. With this, we will do a number of things. We will deal with climate change. At the same time, we will deal with soils. Under the SDGs, we have to be soil degradation neutral. Again, I think if you want to change something there, we have to go to agroecological practices. We can't wait, another 20 years to get there. We know how to do it. I think it's important that we do that. When we go to agroculture practices, we deal not only with the food production, we deal with the social issues linked to agriculture, jobs, environment, health. And so that's very important to keep it all connected. We heard again also from Luc, for example, the whole issues of the connections between production and consumption. Clearly, this is a loop. It is not a linear relationship. So when I say too much production, we also need to see what do we produce. I think the trend to go to a few commodities, between corn, soybeans, and palm oil, the world is going crazy. I think this is something we cannot afford. So changes are needed. We need more diversity in our systems, and more diversity will mean also not only better health because we have more diverse nutrients. We will have also more localized systems. So again, we have more fresh food, more culturally appropriate food. So that's very important. But with basically changing what we grow where, we also allow for people in developing countries to grow their own food. I have been 27 years in Africa. I know that Africa can grow enough of its food for itself. And I keep also saying that America or Europe doesn't have to feed the world. Continents, regions, countries need as much as possible to nourish themselves. And I want to emphasize, we don't feed anybody, we nourish ourselves. So that's very important. Also, I think what I wanted to mention is, we don't have time now to waste in terms of climate change. Agriculture, the way we do it in Europe, in North America, and so the industrialized countries, even the mega oil palm plantation, they are contributing huge amount of CO2 to our atmosphere. And agriculture actually suffers most to it. So we have to, again, transform the system to make them regenerative. And agriculture, which is sustainable, will actually take on in the ground more carbon than it produces. But right now, with the way of industrial agriculture goes, we use 10 calories to produce 1. In agroecological systems, in organic agriculture, for example, we can actually, with 1 calorie in, produce 3 up to 10, 20, 30, depends, what you do and what you grow. So I think that's very important. We also need more resilience towards climate change. And again, agroecological practices will add this resilience towards floods and droughts. Again, the evidence is there. Like in overall, we have plenty evidence that we can transform the system, that we have enough money to do so. Because under the Green Economy Report of UNEP, which was published in 2011, we actually did these calculations very, very great detail. Sorry. And we actually figured out that with about 1/3 of the annual subsidies given to agriculture in the north, in developed countries, we could transform the global agricultural system. So roughly $140 billion a year. So again, it can be done. Now, maybe the last point I want to make is always the question, so how can we do that? I think it was sort of, again, touched on a little bit, but I think we need to say the words. I think we need true costing. Only with true prices. We have to include the externalities in our food prices. Meat will be much more expensive, and Luke mentioned this before. If we want to actually reduce our meat production and consumption, we have to have right prices. And in the end, consumers will react to that. And so that's, to me, at least the best way to do the transformation. Having been in the business for so many years and seeing, it's so difficult to make changes, we have to come to our senses. And if we want to actually reuse ecosystem services, we want to rebuild the ecosystem services. These are actually positive externalities, and we have destroyed them. So again, we need to bring it back in. So all these factors have to be included in our discussion, and I hope that we can later on, have a discussion on some of these points. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hans. And very staggering numbers. We are using 10 calories to produce one, and we could actually turn it to from 1 to produce 2 to 3 calories. So it really must be about regulation and politics and subsidy systems. And Margaret Auken, you are a member of the European Parliament, as I am, from different political groups, and part-time, partly a organic farmer also. So would you like to come in and give your comments on this debate?
Yes.
And please, before you start, just to remind you who are watching the live stream, send your comments and questions on #GlobeEUFood, and we'll come back on those after a minute. Margaret, please.
Thank you very much, and thank you for accepting me being late, but that's how it is under these circumstances in Brussels Airport. But first and foremost, what I've heard up till now, but I didn't hear you, I totally agree. And the problem is that we have had this knowledge for a very long time. I was in the Danish Parliament more than 20 years before I was 12 years ago elected to this parliament here, and lots of the knowledge has been at the table during this time here. And sometimes you have the feeling that the only thing we are in lack of is political will. And that should be a renewable resource. So now we call for it again. And one thing, I think we must remember that year number 1 is as important as year number 10. So when we say we have still another 5 years, 10 years, if we wait until then, forget about it. And that was actually has happened up till now. Most of the things which has changed due to not the fair pricing, but the pricing at the market, which still has pushed for a change, although the prices has been unfair. To energy, has been unfair to nature destruction and so on. And we have got the figures from the agency recently on biodiversity, telling us that it's still decreasing. And we know, that biodiversity is key to the climate, to the food security, to the food production, it is really a key point the whole way around. And still, so little had been done. It is about, the meat consumption has been known for a very long time. I remember when I jumped into environmental discussions in the 80s, it was already at that time a point. And I remember also once when we discussed how to convince people to change their habits, and we got a very good idea. We was not strong enough. You should eat a little bit more Italian.
Mediterranean diet.
Yeah, but you say a little bit more Italian, which means you less meat, more vegetables. And, do it instead of sitting there and a little bit in a pain for having this boring cabbage the whole time, having, much more of this here, and then change your habits, because I think it's, we know it for our own health, and we know it also from the nature. I'm coming from a country from Denmark, from a dramatic high production of, for instance, pigs. We also know that, I like this here, we should not feed the world. Well, we are plundering the world from, phosphate we have a lot of phosphate in the soil in Denmark, but phosphate is turning into be a pollution problem by us. Although we know that phosphate is a needed, dramatically needed substance, and it's limited. And there are so many also world conflicts linked to phosphate, which is very often overseen. So, you know, we have a whole range of good reasons for changing the agricultural production. Still, we didn't manage in the last reform of the CAP. We didn't manage to get the common good as a first priority, which we should have done. You know, we pay so much money to agriculture in Europe, also in my country. And still, you know, the farmers, I don't know if it's as bad in your countries, but in my country, you know, they are acting out from the position, the polluter is paid. You know, they call for compensation if they are not allowed to pollute. And that's, you know, and it's been more or less accepted from the EU too, more or less. I hope less than more, but, and it will change. And still having this farming with a lot of poison. We're killing, you know, I would like to talk about glyphosate to you because glyphosate is all over, and glyphosate kills everything except with the DMOs it comes to. And we know from weeds, we know from lots of other living species, probably it's also dangerous to humans. And at least the precautionary principle should have stopped this here long time ago. And we should have changed it. And we know, and again taking a good story, taking a good story from Denmark and not only bad stories, organic farming has been a success story in my country too. And it shows that the productivity in organic farming can compete with what is called traditional or conventional, or which word is used when you have the chemical farming. It's a little bit more demanding for jobs, which normally is said to be a good thing. So I think we have so many strong arguments, but we need still the political will to do this here. And that means that we have in place our political system in EU, because here we can vote on it. We don't have to wait for all the sleeping member states. You know, we can vote them down, and we have means also to go stronger in for this here. But as long as we don't insist on that, we will lose this battle. And I know I wouldn't blame the farmers in our countries, because they are put in a situation of competition, which if they are not, haven't turned into organic farming, and still it has to take its time to be sustainable. And if we don't do that, then they cannot, you know, they are under heavy pressure too. And we see this with the whole milk issue now, where I think that the reform on the milk reform 15 years back, it's a good reform, but it has not been told in a decent way to our farmers. That what does it mean that this year that you have to reduce the milk production? We've not been honest to our electorates and to our citizens what is all this here about. I'm not going to put much more on this here now, because I think my feeling is that everything has been said already. So just saying that, come on, it's now. And I think if you speak a clear language, if you are honest, then people trust you. And then it shouldn't be that difficult to move them. As soon as people feel that we lie to them, we're not honest, we're trying to cheat them, then we will lose.
Thank you. And of course, agricultural policy is a big part of the food politics. And we have a good chance to intervene here in the European Parliament and EU while we have the midterm review of common agricultural policy coming up. So definitely needed debate, and you watchers, NGOs, people, consumers, eaters, please be active towards the politics and towards the Commission and towards the NGOs and towards industries. And Christian Prinz, from Unilever's point of view, what challenges do you see and what possibilities, and how could we make our food systems sustainable?
Thank you. No, thank you very much, Sherpa. And being the last speaker is always the biggest challenge because, as Margarethe already said, a lot has already been said. So, at the risk of repeating myself, let me start with I would say, perhaps a bit of a bold statement. But I think, as food industry, we have to be brutally honest to ourselves, in the sense that we probably are partly responsible for creating a system that's clearly not sustainable, which makes us also 100% responsible for creating a system that does become sustainable. And we need to take action now because the alternatives are simply not there. And I think some of the numbers of the impacts of climate change have already been mentioned. Now, as Unilever, being a large manufacturer of food product amongst other products, we of course have the skill to take action. And I think we are taking that responsibility very seriously. And I would like to explain 5 pillars that we are working on in order to create more sustainable food systems. But before I dig into them, I just would like to point out that the point that was made about political will, I feel that there is some momentum building actually. I think the last year has been extremely important, both in the New York Declaration on the SDGs as well as the Paris Declaration on climate. I think the global framework is there. I think regions, including Europe, can no longer hide behind, yeah, but China is not doing it or US is not doing it. I think everyone, all the noses are pointing in the same direction. It's now a matter of building on it. And I think industry has a crucial role to play there. So I don't want to push it directly only to to governments. I think it has to be industry, it has to be all societal stakeholders. 5 pillars, I'll be very brief. First, for the environmental impact of agriculture. Our numbers point out that we need to produce more food in the coming 40 years than we've produced in the past 10,000 years. So we have a massive challenge to increase food production considerably. And this will require twice as much water as we're currently using, and much of it will have to be gained in water-stressed regions. So that's already quite a challenge. Now, we have set up as Unilever our Sustainable Agricultural Code in 2010 that we use as a benchmark to reach by 2020 100% sustainable sourcing of all our agricultural raw materials. Now we will be using third-party certification schemes when they're available, but unfortunately certification schemes are not always available. So as a default option we always have our Sustainable Agriculture Code. We currently are sourcing 60% of our agricultural raw materials sustainably. We want to get it up to 100% by 2020. And what's really important is that we are now able to make the transition from what we do at a company level to a global level, involving other participants from the retail sector, from the industry sector, to agree a common set of sustainable standards. Second one is smallholder farmers. 80% of food productions come from smallholder farmers, not the big farmers. We need to include them in our supply chains in order to make sure that they have a socially balanced life. I think the point was very clearly made by Mr. Hedden. Food production is not just about nutrition. There's also a social element and an environmental element very clearly linked to it. And smallholder farmers, of which many, we estimate that up to 60% of smallholder farmers are women, have a crucial role to play in order to actually increase food production. So we need to give them a role in our supply chains, and Unilever is doing that. We are currently working with over 600,000 smallholder farmers in our own supply chains. Food waste has already been mentioned a lot of times, but just perhaps as an anecdotal number, if food waste was a country, it would be the 3rd greatest emitter of CO2 after the US and China. It's something that we just cannot accept. We need to work on that, and over 20% of global food waste occurs post-retail, so once the consumer has bought it in our households. So I think Unilever, of course, having a reach of engaging with 2 billion consumers every day using our products, we have a clear role to play there. How do we inform consumers about what can they do with food waste? How do we create smaller portion sizes, for example, that prevented people overbuying? So there's clearly a big role to play there for industry, and perhaps the SDG on food waste has been mentioned a couple of times. So perhaps just to underline Unilever's attachment to it, that our CEO Paul Polman is become the champion of exactly this SDG. So you can actually hold us accountable on reaching the target of halving food waste. Nutrition security has already been mentioned, but we have 1.4 people overweight and 2 billion people undernourished. I mean, those are staggering facts, and there's just no sense in that in some regions we are eating ourselves almost to death, whereas in other countries the people are starving to death. So food industry clearly has a role to play there. We do that through a number of practices. It's through fortification programs in regions where there's undernutrition, and through reformulation of our existing portfolio in regions where there's overnutrition. And finally, just to pick on the point that was made on meat consumption, we would be fully supportive. The power of plants is what we call it. If we would consume more plants, we could reduce emissions from agriculture up to 40%. And Unilever's portfolio is actually very plant focused. We have a lot of dairy alternatives, we have a lot of meat alternatives, and we believe that we can play a key role here. I'm going to end here, Sirpa, but just by making a call that industry can do a lot within our own supply chains. We can do a lot working together with retailers, with our suppliers, with our competitors. But an enabling environment set by, for example, at a global level, SDGs and climate, but also through regulation and legislation at for example, Commission level would be extremely helpful. Having, for example, agreed standards on what do we call sustainable production. Could we tweak our trade standards that we will be sourcing only sustainably sourced raw materials from outside Europe rather than non-sustainably sourced material? It is possible. It requires, as you've said, Margarethe, political will, but I think the momentum is building. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Christian. And power of plants indeed. And that shows how, in a way, simple some of the solutions are. Good for the health, good for the environment, good for the animals, good for the climate and nutrition in general. So, but you mentioned, thank you for your ambitious commitments, but you mentioned also the role of the regulation. And I've sensed that some of the problems, especially in the globally, and you working in the company that is duly global company, is the problems of lacking policy coherence that we have in food politics globally. And as you said, regulation plays a role there. So I would like to give our commissioner the chance to comment on this and our other speakers, and then feel free to comment before we open up the whole debate, each of your points of view.
You know, we have many regulatory tools. Not only mandatory through law, but we have also self-regulatory tools. We all know that from farm to fork, such concept means that all operators are responsible, as you mentioned, honesty. I have good debates in Denmark with your agricultural council, which was organic one. And they debated issues. I asked, and they also raised questions about glyphosate. I asked them, do you use some pesticides sometimes? Yes, in some conditions they use. And it's scientifically, of course. By now when they use, but it's true. And you need. No, it's not only. It's not only. I speak about pesticides, because as you know, if you mention such topic, it needs separate debates. It's not just one of the simple questions. But speaking about regulatory tools, you mentioned voluntary targets by Commission proposed because of countries agreed on United Nations level on sustainable development goals. You know, those goals are agreed between all member states. And we have not voluntary, we have agreeable targets which are in place. And it will be not logic to have different targets. You know, our obligation is till 2030, and the Commission decided to support member states because the Commission knows that targets are in place. And then, of course, we will discuss our methodologies, how to measure food waste. It's a very serious question. how to measure, how to agree on common methodologies to support member states to measure where they are and in which direction they are moving and which targets they have and how they are effective to achieving some. And today in my DG we're debating those issues related to methodology because it's very scientifically difficult question, and fusion projects is very important project to look at. Of course, also when we speak about possibilities to introduce sustainability, we must keep in mind socially affordable prices. Socially affordable prices today, not tomorrow, because 100 and more million people they have no chance to buy more qualified food because they have lack of money, lack of resources. We must understand complex of social environment, and of course also must debate those questions very openly. How to present not only sustainable but socially acceptable technologies and possibilities to have more to open doors to for biggest part of population to healthier food, because food not only safety, it must be healthy. But as you mentioned, healthy food, it means if you use some technology which raise prices, you then have conflict between lower price people and highest price. And from I am medical doctor, from health point of view, social determinants are on the table. Less income part of society has more problems with chronic diseases. Why? Because they use low quality food, and we must discuss with industry, with all society. I agree about political will. Today is time to act in very complex and very comprehensive manner. And of course, speaking about regulatory tools, many tools are in place. Plant health, regulatory tools, use of pesticides, environmental protection, many instruments. I can't imagine to have only one regulatory instrument. I see very complex of problems on the table.
Actually, this is an interesting paradigm that let's say, poorest quarter of the eaters are paying the most out of the nutrition they are buying, and they have a big part of the health problems issue too. So we all would need to have a role to play there. And it would be nice that the EU could have a common food policy, sustainable food policy, like we are having agricultural policy at some point in the future. But look, please, what would be your comments on the debate?
Yeah, I want to come back on, of course I'm happy to hear that there will be serious attempts to get that food waste down, and that a regulatory framework through the circular economy package might help with it. We just have to see what it means. The other thing about methodology, as IUCN is a science-based organization, we of course attach a lot of importance to getting the numbers right and the measurement right. At the same time, it's the typical thing about perfect being the enemy of the good and not acting before you all know all you need to know. So there is a lot of low-hanging fruit that can be regulated or can be. And in this context, by the way, it's a nice expression, low-hanging fruit. But
yes.
But there is definitely a lot more that can be done to regulation. Second, we have another opportunity apart with the Juncker agenda, with the better regulation agenda. If that is something that goes through all the policies that the EU puts forward, and not in the least the one that is eating up most of the budget, 40% of the European budget goes into agriculture. So you could argue, okay, when are we going to really get into better regulation when it comes to agricultural policy? How will we actually look into that and make good use? Vice President Georgieva also says, let's make sure our budget is focused on results. And now we see that with the common agricultural policy, it's not good for the farmers themselves, which is in the end most important because it's about the people. It's not good for environment. And that, of course, will always spill over in not being good for health and for people. And most importantly, it's also not good for the third countries. So this has a devastating effect on the third countries and on the production there. Another thing I wanted to remark is about as you said, the increase in food production that will be needed. We always have to be, and you did say it, but we have to be very clear that it is In the developing countries where you have water scarcity and so on and so forth, there we will need some more food production. That's clear. It's clear we have to feed the hungry in the world, but we hope that they won't repeat, of course, our unhealthy and unsustainable diets. On the prices, I agree that and this is potentially one of the most challenging, is we have to have a system in place in which we can make sure that those that can afford it and can pay a higher price for a higher quality and healthier food. That has to be defined then, of course. One that is clear is the meat consumption, which is too high. That's the easy one. So you can already easily try to regulate that without having all the scientific proof. But you need to correct the prices so maybe some of the subsidies need to be used to promote the buying of healthy food for those that cannot afford it. Because many of those people in the social, more deprived communities of Europe are actually buying very unhealthy food, often much more unhealthy than those that are, let's say, higher educated, if you want. And then the last point is about what you said, 1/3 is lost at the end of the chain. And I don't know the exact numbers, I assume it's right because you're actually the expert and being from the industry knowing this, but this means that 2/3 is in the food chain. And you said that you're doing a lot about the food chain, but I would like to hear what it is exactly that you do to reduce the waste in the food chain. Or maybe some 1 or 2 examples where you have been successful. Because I think it's still, the majority is still lost in the food chain, let's not forget that.
Christian, do you want to answer on that directly and put your comments for the other panelists, and then Hans, I'll ask you to come in after Christian's comments.
No, absolutely. Thank you. No, you're absolutely right. Clearly, within the value chain, you also need to partner in order to make sure that products are not for apart from safety reasons, are not discarded. For the wrong reasons, because that clearly is a large chunk of the food waste which is happening. To be very honest, if we, the number I was quoting was a global number, not a Unilever number. To be very clear, I think if we would look in our value chain, I think that probably the post-retail phase of food waste is probably a lot higher. To be very honest, I think a lot higher, because clearly a company like ours has a clear benefit of making sure that less raw material is wasted as you are using. So you're very clearly working with your suppliers and within your own production process to limit that to a maximum. I think our biggest struggle is actually at the consumer phase, because the consumer phase, so the moment that someone buys our product and they walk out the store, how do we make sure that they actually consume everything? And of course we have a lot of products that you can use to actually cook your vegetables, to help people make whatever lasagna or soup or whatever, where you can actually use your leftovers that you have. So it's truly a behavioral change. It has become so easy and so cheap to throw away food. There's no penalty on it actually, because you can always go back to the store and buy a new one. But I think we all know the examples of our grandmothers that said, this is perfectly fine, why on earth are you throwing it away? And that's because they lived through different times.
Yes, I was just going to come back on good old granny's time, but you did it on my behalf. So, Hans, what would you like to come in with?
I would like to go back a little bit to this, the comments of the Commissioner regarding socially affordable prices. I think people think they have a God-given right to cheap food. And so, and again, it's a behavior issue, as we just heard also from Christian. But I think that cheap food is actually very expensive. And again, that's why I go back to, where our leverage points to change the system is actually to make sure that we have true costing. And we do that, even the poorer people in the community will eventually pay less, because today, let's say organic food is more expensive because it includes externalities already. The other one doesn't. So basically people pay via taxes for environment, for health, etc., instead of actually being in charge of their own health, having the option of buying good food. And so I think we really badly need these standards and basically make sure that we change this food pricing issue. On the standards, I would be very careful to let the industry set their standards. Now you have Unilever standards, you have Nestle standards, you have everybody have their own. I think this is something government need to tackle. And okay, this is the sustainability standard, not up to the people to make their own. So I think it's important. But in the end, we cannot change the system without remodeling the institution who do research and development. Look at Europe. You can look almost everywhere. How much research, how much money of the total research and development money in agriculture goes to organic, to agroecological? We're still in the green revolution type of research. Go to university. It's mostly funded through the industry, again, to foster and promote their own type of agriculture. So government need to take back the responsibility to do research, development, extension, both in the developed as well as in developing countries. What Europe does in terms of research in agriculture matters also in Africa and elsewhere. And I think so that we cannot separate these things, and I think we have a lot to do there. On the comment on, organic use of pesticides, well, again, if we had more and better research and systems research, we could have systems where we don't need this. I've been 27 years in Africa. We have built systems, they don't need any inputs, no fertilizer, no pesticides, because we grow plants to defend themselves. They can go get their own nutrients, and we quadrupled the production in areas where even water shortages. So we can do it. We know how to do it, but we have to stop, basically interfering with old agricultural practices because it serves the industry purposes. I think we need a total change, and we have said exactly what to do. And I think if I have a suggestion, I think to the EU right now, is that the EU should insist by FAO to organize an agroecology meeting, symposium, like they have in FAO, like they have in 3 countries, in the developing countries, also in Europe. Agroecology, organic agriculture, or sustainable agriculture, whatever, sort of goes under this hat, is not only for developing countries. It is a matter of Europe. And Europe, for example, can produce less and better. And I think this is where we need to go. We don't need all this overproduction everywhere. So we have to figure out a better system, and we can. Thank you.
Thank you. This is very interesting and true that with the right choices you can produce affordable food for everybody because, for example, organic barley or some other local production and seasonal vegetables are quite often rather affordable in price levels. But Margaret, please,
yes.
You have been trying quite some time.
Yeah, well, it's not my habit. No, but thank you very much. And just, I think it's nice to listen to, but you coming from Unilever, we know, we have good meetings with Unilever too, but the way industry has been lobbying is dramatic. And one of you mentioned the better regulation. And better regulation, if I should translate it immediately, it is less, it's a minimum state with a bureaucratic monster to stop everything. And you have Business Europe sitting on all sides. And we have seen how Business Europe has lobbied not to have regulation, not to have anything. We remember when we should have this food declaration and they tried to keep breakfast products out and lobby and manage to get the Commission on their side. So we couldn't get the true information on this here. So, we're really in a mess here, and we need so much a progressive industry lobby where you organize, some not so fine guys, all of them, but still calling for more regulation, stronger state, more intervention, and not this just leaving it to the big gangsters. Because, that's what happened. And when I know our commissioner saying I'm hysterical about glyphosate, I don't think so. I'm not hysterical on endocrine disruptors too, and I've followed what happened to the endocrine disruptors. When we have seen it, and we have seen how it has been stopped, and that's pesticides. It's not only, it is a health issue, but it's in pesticides, which means that going for the organic farming is dramatically needed. And then secondly, and there we need, the progressive industry lobbying to make sure that we don't get this all too weak legislation. Of course, lots could be done on, which some supermarkets have done in Denmark, I guess in many countries, selling out the last day of products which are almost running out, and then make sure it's not wasted. Make sure that we have better education in schools, how to eat. And I think many countries are already now trying to produce food in towns at roofs, at everywhere. So, you know, there's a big movement to do all this kind of stuff. But we have to tackle the main challenge, and that is really that we are more or less forced into a situation where it's close to impossible to get rid of this heavy lobbying for bad products and all too cheap things to, you know, just one little thing. I put a question in Denmark years ago, how much oestrogens is coming out of the pig production. Probably nobody, as far as I know, has investigated what happens to, you know, it's coming out with, we produce, I think it's 20 to 25 million pigs in a population where we have 5 million people.
Same in Flanders.
Yeah, but you know, probably worse in Denmark. And nobody, because it's such a big lobby group, has really investigated what happens here. And then, and I will stop it here, but just say that politically, I like so much when you, Androkaitis, was talking about the social issue. But as long as we don't take into consideration how much the big lobbyists are the driving force in what's going on. And I remember my own commissioner from Denmark, which I like very much in her place here, but talking about big on big things and small things. And small things, that was environment. Yeah, full stop.
Quite often the regulators is of course this kind of a point of avoiding free riders, and when we are talking about standards and indicators, it's very much of course the point that if everybody has different kind of standards, it's a bit like everybody company having different kind of accounting systems, so you lose the comparability, and that's why there should be this kind of a harmonized approach. But before I give very brief comments to our commissioner, I think it would be fair to give to Christian the chance to comment on this standard and lobby issue.
Well, no, but I'll be extremely brief because I fully agree with what Margarethe has been saying, and that's also the reason why, for example, we are here, and why Unilever showed up to this panel discussion, to make sure that there is also another industry voice, one which is saying that actually we are in need of an enabling environment where policy has a clear role to play. I would fully support what Mr. Herren was saying, that we don't want Unilever standards existing next to other company standards. We would love to have a European rubber stamping of this is what we consider sustainable, you name the product, sustainable tomatoes, sustainable carrots, on which basis you can then also start to drive policy forward. And you can weed out the unsustainable production. If you would look at the position statement Unilever has been supporting in terms of the circular economy package, on a clear target setting for waste, including for food waste, on clear EPR schemes, etc., we fully endorse the need of legislation to create an enabling environment. I fully support your view that industry is not doing enough, particularly the collective industry bodies. That's where the real battle is to be fought. We are definitely trying, we're putting our weight behind it, but I agree with you, more needs to be done.
Create your own organization to compete with Business Europe.
So diverse forces, this is always good. Yes, please.
Okay, I agree with you that we need in regulation. And it's not about big and big, small and small. It's not about. It's Europe. European Union must be understandable as a very reasonable regulator. We need to understand where the reason is to regulate. Not all more or less, because not about. When we speak about animal health or plant health or official control or medicated feed or veterinary medicine, we need regulation. But we must understand that such regulation, which was 20 years before, it's today absolutely different, because we have today digital instruments. We need to have good opportunity to use new tools in regulation area. I am personally very in favor of proper regulation. It's my professional background. And you mentioned, of course, about sustainability and food, not only safety food, healthy food, and it means reformulation. idea of encourage all together to accept reformulation issues. Of course, a roadmap was presented from the Dutch presidency side. It's a very good example when industry and member states decided to voluntarily to accept roadmap and to reformulating food. And you know, you mentioned very well problems about meat. You know, those two pyramids. It is, of course, it's all like this. One pyramid, if you use everyday crops and then 4 days vegetables and fruits, seafoods, and only twice per week meat, it is pyramid. And if you every day use meat, you have big risk of cancer. And it is scientifically based pyramids, which we know very well. We will disseminate those ideas, how to encourage European communities to draw attention not only about speaking of nutrient profiles, but about diets. Mediterranean diet is only one of them, but generally speaking, we know very well scientifically based approach. Why I'm advocating lifestyle medicine, new type of medicine, which use nutrition as not only as food, but as treatment method. It's okay. We must understand food reformulation, healthy food, how to support those who are in need, especially socially determined part of society. It's very painful. 150 million Europeans today suffer because of it's not enough food. And as I agree with you when you said that fast food is very, of course, it's very priced. It's not cheap food, but you know, we must all together say, okay, we must change. And it's of course speaking about food waste. Also, the same problems are related to food reformulation. It means we must accept technologies which are more friendly, not wasting food. Many issues. I agree with you. This is a very complex problem.
Thank you. We are coming almost to the end of our debate, but do any of you have any quick comments? Still, look, you raised your hand.
Just a few, and I wanted to emphasize that when I mentioned better regulation, I wanted to use it as an opportunity, but it has to be understood for what it really needs to be. Of course, we have seen a lot of comments and a lot of attempts to translate better regulation into less regulation. That, of course, is not the idea. But we want to see, and we agree that there is many parts where maybe there is some over-regulation. We see often these very ridiculous examples being used where there is indeed over-regulation. But that is very sparse. I don't think there's too much. There's a lot of wrong regulation, yes, and coming back to the common agriculture policy, where we have the biggest wins to get if we get it right. Another thing was on, and this is a bit related to regulation. We've seen in the smoking or the use of cigarettes that a strong regulation has already got some success. There's still too much smoking, and this was so easy because it's so clearly unhealthy. But with food, there should be actually a similar approach that we actually put on the food that is actually causing cancer when you eat too much of it, or that we have actually warnings there even. You could even put warnings on unhealthy food and make clear this is, you're not going to live out 30, 40 years if you do so. So that's, I think regulation is utterly important to steer also consumption of unsustainable food. And then the last point, which I was happy to hear, but I haven't seen the numbers, and it was always my concern because I'm a fan of organic agriculture. But I was always, and still am, a bit fearful about the productivity per hectare and whether this actually can then deliver, not in Europe. In Europe, I think with organic farming, we would get all the food we need, but is this indeed achievable for the millions of hungry people globally? So that it's an open question.
There's big
very
studies showing that.
For nature, it's definitely better. Yeah, but it would be good to have more numbers there because this is often used by the industry. You won't get enough per hectare to feed the population. And by the way, land use, hectare, is influencing your nature and your ecosystem. So we need to be very careful on how we use land. And for meat production, organically, we know that it's definitely using more hectares than in the current production. But we know we need less meat.
Okay, Hans, you have the last word before concluding remarks.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's very good because just to follow on what has been said, again, the experience shows that enough they will start much below in terms of yields and productivity of the land. So ideally, by just doing organic and sustainable production methods, you can double, treble, quadruple the production in a sustainable way. We're not starting with those high artificial yields we have in Europe and North America. So again, Africa double production with some of the methods were developed in the past 20 years by the international and also national research system. They're all based on basically DNA kernels. It can be done. We have demonstrated it. It's been written down everywhere. So we need to stop thinking that we need more inputs to produce more. No, we need more actually knowledge we do. But again, we know what they are and they fit in the sustainable agricultural system. And on the meat production, again, in many places in the world, we have grasslands which actually need animals to feed. And so we need to stop getting, like in Europe and elsewhere, to feed cows with soybeans and corn, which it doesn't like, and lettuce. So we're going to have less production of meat, much better quality, omega-6, omega-3, more of it. And I think so we can do that. We need to eat less meat, yes, but better quality. It's going to be more expensive, so be it. We're going to consume less. And I think the environment will be better off everybody. This is I think that we still also require more R&D funded by the government and not by the private sector. Thank you.
Thank you, Hans. Thank you, Margaret. Thank you, Commissioner Dennis. Thank you, Christian. And look, very interesting debate. And thank you for our listeners and watchers. New ideas. Sustainable food and food politics is achievable. Actually, it's our responsibility. Common agricultural policy reform is a possibility, and not a possibility. It's a necessity, but it's a possibility to with 40% of our expenditure. And from Hans, very interesting. FAO and why not Commission and EU to organize agroecologic symposium where we go more in deep on this substance. So please stay in contact, follow the food debate, be active with politicians, industry, Commission, and of course the NGOs and scientists doing the work on here. Thank you, and for the next time.